afternoon, and welcome to the Vital Village Networks of Opportunity for Child Wellbeing 2023 webinar series, Collaborative Action and Coalition Building, Transformative Practices for Healing, Joy, and Equity. Through this three-part series, we'll hear from leaders across the country who are using collective leadership approaches to design, build, and foster community centered on the healing and joy of children and families. I'm Ronda Alexander, and I get to serve as the Director of National Partnerships with Vital Village Networks, and I'm so excited to be here with you. To kick off this year's series, you'll hear from three phenomenal leaders who are using participatory governance strategies to reimagine early care and education for children, families, providers, and more. As we begin our time together, I'd like to acknowledge that we are continuing to strengthen our language justice practices, and this webinar series will be available in Spanish with interpretation services provided by our partners at the Community Language Cooperative based in Colorado. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Valentina to share a little bit more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Rhonda. So yes, I'm Valentina, and I'm here on behalf of Community Language Cooperative, and I'm here to provide and guarantee your commitment to language justice. Language justice is a type of simultaneous interpretation that seeks to create spaces in which no one language is dominant, spaces in which everyone can participate with the language of their heart. So to achieve this objective, we will be using Zoom's interpretation feature. And what you will see in a couple of minutes after I offer the instructions both in English and in Spanish is that a new little button that looks like a globe, like the one featured on the screen right now, will appear on the bottom bar of your screen, on that same bar where you usually have the mic, the video, the chat, and all of those other buttons. It'll be towards your right hand. When you see this button, go ahead and click on it and select either English or Spanish as the language that you will be listening into. If you're joining the meeting on a phone or on a tablet, you will find the same options for interpretation by clicking on the button with the three little dots in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. This button reads More. You can also select to mute the original language to avoid overlapping both the English and the Spanish. Hola a todos, a todas y a todos, buenos días. Mi nombre es Valentina y estoy aquí por parte de Community Language Cooperative para ofrecerles y garantizar su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje. La justicia del lenguaje es un tipo de interpretación simultánea que busca crear espacios en los que no domine ningún idioma, espacios en los que todos puedan participar con el idioma de su corazón. Para lograr este objetivo vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación de Zoom. Lo que aparecerá en un momentito es un nuevo botón que parece un globo terráqueo como el que está en la pantalla, que aparecerá en la barra inferior de su pantalla, en esa misma barra donde están los botones para el micrófono, para el video, para el chat, etc. Vuestra hacia su mano derecha. Cuando vean este botoncito aparecer, hagan clic en él y seleccionen inglés o español como el idioma en el que van a estar participando en esta sesión. Si usted está en esta reunión por medio de una tableta o de un teléfono, encontrará las mismas opciones haciendo clic en el botón que tiene 3 puntos en la esquina inferior derecha de su pantalla. Este botón dice More o Más. También puede seleccionar Silenciar el lenguaje original para evitar escuchar tanto el inglés como el español. Muchas gracias. Vamos a activar ahora los canales de interpretación. Thank you so much for having me here. We can go ahead and start the interpretation channels.
Thank you so much, Valentina. At this time, as Valentina has instructed, please take a moment to click the globe icon and located on the bottom of your Zoom window and select the language that works best for you. Just want to share a couple of quick housekeeping tips. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the Now Innovation Forum within the next few days. Finally, I encourage you to engage with us by sharing what resonates with you in the chat and submitting questions through the Q&A, and our guests will have an opportunity to respond a little bit later. But before I go a little bit further, I'd love to welcome our founding director, Dr. Renee Boynton-Jarrett, to share a few remarks.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this important webinar series. We're excited to kick off this year. But I'd be remiss if we didn't begin by first acknowledging recent national events and reaffirming our shared commitment to an environment where every child has the ability to thrive and learn and build relationships and experience the world in safe and nurturing environments. where the fear of violence is not the determining factor, and that they can explore and experience the world with great joy. So we deeply appreciate your time and you joining us, and we hope that we can continue to work with you all collectively to create that future and that community for every child. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Really appreciate you grounding us there. So as we work through our time together today, just wanted to share, while we may only be together for 1 hour, it will be packed with stories from the field and lessons for us to take back to our own practices. So we'll share a very brief overview of Vital Village Networks, and now followed by remarks from our featured speakers, and later you'll be able to pose questions to them before we wrap up with some announcements of things coming up and opportunities. So just giving you a sense of what we'll be talking through today. So whether you are joining us for the first time or have been with us for a while, just want to share a little bit more about Vital Village Networks. We are a collaborative of change makers committed to pioneering sustainable approaches to transforming child, family, and community well-being. We are rooted in Boston with a broad web of peers and partners all over the country, connected through our networks of opportunity for child well-being, better known as NOW. We are bonded through our guiding principles of creating shared spaces for belonging, learning, engaging, and transforming our communities together. And to hear more about our work or share your own stories, we invite you to visit the Now Innovation Forum. Our address is located on your screen, where you can find access to a variety of tools, resources, and stories from leaders across the country and around the world, working collaboratively to shift what it means for our children, our families, and our communities to thrive. So now that you've been oriented to Vital Village Networks, and now I'd like to transition to hearing from our speakers, Marisa Fear, Yolanda Ramos, and Damaris Alvarado-Rodriguez. Their bios and links to resources will be in the chat, so I encourage you to explore them following our time together. And before I turn it over to Marisa and Yolanda, I'd just like to invite you to not only listen, but consider what you're hearing and what actions you might take to advance your own work. So following this session, you might receive a reflective action guide that looks something like this, just to help you reflect on what you're learning and unpack what you've heard. And this document is, of course, available in both English and Spanish. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Marisa Fear, the Associate Director for Research and Policy at Strategies for Children, and Yolanda Ramos, Consultant with the Together for Kids Coalition, to talk more about the work that they're doing in Massachusetts. So Yolanda and Marisa, welcome.
Thank you, Rhonda. It's great.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so we can start by doing just some quick introductions, and I'll kick it off and then pass it over to Yolanda and then get our slide deck started. So thank you, Rhonda, for mentioning that. I'm Marisa Fear. I'm the Associate Director of Research and Policy at Strategies for Children. And Strategies for Children is an early education and child care policy and advocacy organization that's based in Boston, but has sort of a statewide focus throughout Massachusetts. Yolanda?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Marisa. So my name is Yolanda Ramos. I'm from Worcester, and I'm a consultant with Together for Kids Coalition. I'm also a mental health provider specializing in early childhood behavioral and trauma. I'm also part of the Strategy for Children Advocacy Network, first cohort. And my passion really is Together for Kids Coalition work in the community. And the coalition is with over 160 members right now from the Worcester area who work in supporting the collaborative system that ensures a healthy start for every child in Worcester.
All right, So we'll dive into our presentation here, and I know we'll have some time later for questions, but if anything comes up, please feel free to use the Q&A function and add them there. So we are joining you today to talk a little bit about Yolanda and I's collaborative work with the Early Childhood Agenda, sort of my perspective from the state perspective as a member of Strategies for Children who is hosting this initiative, and then Yolanda's perspective from more of a local participant, as well as someone who's really leading at the local level to organize parents around this initiative. So the story of the Early Childhood Agenda really begins with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the early months of the pandemic, Strategies for Children launched a new initiative called the 930 Call, which was really meant to connect early educators with each other, to connect early educators with decision makers. We knew it was an ever-changing context and wanted to be able to provide a space where participants could inform policy that was changing so rapidly. And this changed our work entirely. It was, I think, forced everyone in the advocacy and policy community out of some of our habits or the way we had done work traditionally before that. And we've been so sort of grateful for that community and that experience because it has really informed all of the work that we've done since then. Now moving into the Early Childhood Agenda, and as Yolanda mentioned, through our advocacy network as well. So what we really saw was that for the first time, there was a increased need for this cross-sector collaboration in early childhood that we kept repeating to ourselves, this sort of consistent frustration with, why isn't this policy aligned with that policy as things were changing so rapidly? And the 930 Call also served as this place where we could sort of build a foundation, have a sort of an orientation to all of the various early childhood programs and services, professionals working in the space and how it all fits together. Moving forward to our organization's strategic planning process, we, hearing this feedback, seeing this sort of need in the field, wanted to be able to create a space for the early childhood community to come together, to bring people who care about young children and want to work across different communities to think about health and housing, business, transportation, education, and how all of these things fit within early childhood in pursuit of equitable and impact-driven solutions. We also know that cross-sector collaboration is important because early childhood issues are often interconnected. And this convening relies on sort of these long-standing partnerships that Strategies, as an organization that's been in Massachusetts for over 20 years, as well as new partnerships that have sort of emerged through the 930 Call. One of the very first things we did through the Early Childhood Agenda was establish values for the community, and this was something that we did together as sort of a full convening. And what we're sort of in the messy middle of now is thinking about the next phase of the agenda and how we're going to bring these values and sort of see them in practice as well through both the solutions and priorities we're pushing forward, through the design of sort of our governance structure and the way that we can engage partners through the Early Childhood Agenda, and the way that we're sort of centering and engaging voices as well. So the values that we have identified here are thinking about evidence-based solutions. So through a consensus building process that we developed to develop collective, systemic, sustainable, data-informed solutions that take into account culture and improve early childhood services and programs, as well as advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So really thinking about how is this reflected in the solutions that we're pushing forward? How is this reflected in our structures and sort of the way that we run the Early Childhood Agenda? How is this reflected in the leadership opportunities that are presented for individuals, parents, and providers who work in the early childhood space? Engaging and centering voices, again, being mindful of holding this space and that not wanting to just engage, but also empower the voices of the early childhood community, and thinking about how we can set up this sort of structure in a way that does that authentically, and that that our individuals who are participating in this feel like they are prepared and supported in order and informed to speak out about early childhood and share their sort of lived experience, as well as to leverage strength. So to know that we can't be everything to everyone and not want to do that either. So to rely on the collective sort of strength, content expertise, knowledge, and connections of our partners. You know, as an example, we have content expertise in early education and childcare, but we are by no means the experts in health or housing or many of these other issue areas that we're now learning about. And so wanting to really rely on our partners' expertise in those areas. Same thing with organizing, that we are not a direct service provider, but wanting to rely on organizations like Yolanda's who have those relationships, those longstanding relationships with communities, and are engaging with partners that we want to be able to inform the agenda. And then finally, professionalization. This was one thing that the community really felt strongly about wanting to include on the values, that wanting to sort of have professionalization be driven from the ground up, and that the early childhood workforce should be those who are leading in that space rather than thinking about it coming from the top down. So how are we doing this in practice? There's a number of different ways that we are sort of implementing this through the early childhood agenda. And the first would be this culture of continuous improvement. So it's often messy, and I think that's a good thing lots of times, but we know that transparency and inclusion lead to better policy design in the end. So everything throughout this entire process has been open to the entire group. We've tried to institute sort of multiple check-in points throughout this sort of design process and planning process, where not only are we asking those who are closest to the work to inform the policy, but also to inform the structure that we're creating here. And we do that through sort of this plus delta structure, where we're thinking about what's working, what's not working, how can we get feedback from the group at large, as well as through a variety of sort of online and virtual tools that have allowed us to get feedback, consistent feedback from the group at different points in time. We've also instituted this Elevating Voices Continuum, which you can see a little graphic here on the right-hand side, which we've used at all of our in-person meetings. We've used them in sort of the virtual setting. And it's one of the first questions that we've been asking all participants of the early childhood agenda, is just sort of self-identify where they sit within the field. And because there are so many different sectors, what we've really narrowed this down to is identifying yourself as a 1 if you are either the caregiver of a young child or you interact with children and families every day. Number 2, if you interact with children and families occasionally. And number 3, if you do not interact with children and families, but you do have a vested interest in early childhood. And this has really allowed us to see sort of who is involved in this effort, how many 1s and 2s we have engaged in forming these agenda items, as well as to ensure that when we are creating spaces, when we are holding meetings, that we are not prioritizing one voice over another, but we're ensuring that we have a level playing field, and that we want to hear from the 1s first and the 2s next and the 3s finally after that. And that structure has really changed a lot of the sort of typical meeting norms or cultures that we might have seen before then, when you have just an awareness of who's speaking and identifying ourselves sort of on the Zoom screen by those numbers, so that we know that, you know, whenever we pose a question, that we want to hear from the 1s first, and to feel invited and comfortable in that space to share their perspectives. We've also thought about this with leadership opportunities. So the sort of decision-making body that we're designing around the early childhood agenda, thinking about specific roles on that body. So it's called the stewardship team, to ensure that we have lived experience at that table, that it's not just organizations or sort of coalition leaders who are in that space, but also those who are working with children and families every day, or who have young children and families, so that we're ensuring that sort of the family voice and the workforce voice are present there as well. And to ensure that when we are thinking about sort of leadership opportunities within this early childhood agenda, that there is a space for those with lived experience as well. So whether it's through facilitation or sort of providing that content expertise, that we're valuing that and ensuring that there are sort of pathways forward within sort of the leadership structure as well. We've also had a lot of lessons learned about in-person versus virtual engagement, knowing that because this is a statewide initiative, that traveling from one corner of the state to another is a big ask, and it often means that participants are not able to join us at the early childhood agenda. So doing the majority of these meetings in a virtual environment where we are able to access sort of a larger early childhood community than we would be if we did this in person. It's been one big lesson learned, thinking through the meeting times. So meeting at a time that is convenient for those that we know we want to have in the space. So when we're thinking about those who have young children, who work with young children every day, that often means in the evenings, which has been something that we've tried to include throughout this entire process. And finally, just to provide a number of virtual engagement opportunities. So we've utilized a service called Group Maps, which has allowed participants to provide feedback sort of when they want, how they want, whether it's 6 in the morning or 10 p.m. at night, sort of a platform that they can go into and provide a response to something that that sort of allows them to do it at a time that's convenient for them, that doesn't require an in-person meeting necessarily. And then finally, language access and financial support. So very similar to this meeting, to think about language access during our meetings and ensure that we do have translation and interpretation available when we're thinking about surveys and documents, information, as well as direct meetings. And then finally, financial support. So acknowledging the time and energy that it takes to participate in these types of efforts, to value that in terms of financial support as well, but also to acknowledge that there are implications for that as well too. And so to think about sort of the two sides of that coin, and how are we partnering and having these conversations together so that participants feel supported and feel like they are valued for the perspective and for the time that they are providing to the early childhood agenda. And I wanted to share sort of what the agenda looks like now. Throughout the past 5 or 6 months now, we have worked collaboratively to identify and elevate 10 priorities for the early childhood community in Massachusetts. You'll see them reflected here on the sort of right-hand side of the screen. I'll happy to share the link in the chat as well so that you can go through that when Yolanda's speaking. But what I really wanted to sort of zoom in on is priority number 6, which is really about thinking through the local landscape, local infrastructure, navigation supports. When we think about what this looks like at the local level, what do we need in Massachusetts to ensure that sort of families know what programs and services are available to them, that supports are in place, that quality supports are in place, that there's a governance structure and infrastructure for early childhood at the local level. And that was one of the challenges that was articulated through this process, and one of our priorities moving forward. And I think Yolanda is well positioned, being someone who works at the local level, to speak more about how that recommendation sort of lives in her day-to-day work, and as well as how she hopes to inform the process moving forward. I will turn it over to Yolanda.
Thank you, Marisa. Okay, so I can talk a little bit about the structure of Together for Kids Coalition here in our community. So Together for Kids Coalition support the early childhood health, universal high quality, affordable early education and care, family engagement, which is very important to us, and engaging businesses in the whole community and supporting families and children. So those are our guiding principles for our work. And this is why our kind of 4 pillars of that model looks like. So we work through effective community planning and building those cross-sectors relationship with local community partners. And as we build that early childhood system that works throughout Massachusetts, we created a map of local continuum of care ecosystem, which is kind of looks like a little bit like this. And we're really focusing on each spectrum of that continuum of care in kind of bite sizes. So if we think about the continuum of care ecosystem in early childhood, is huge. So we really wanted to focus on piece by piece as we built this system. So last year, we really focused on that prenatal to age 1. And at the end of the year, we developed a program that focuses on that prenatal to H1 continuum of care part. So we created the Welcome Baby. Through this process, we also were able to identify where the gaps are. So if you see the start, that's where the gaps that we need continue work is, and we'll continue to build with those partners that are working in these areas. If you can go to the next slide, Marisa. So just a quick glimpse of what Welcome Baby is and what we're doing in Worcester from our work last year in the first year of the Continuum of Care focus. We're building this program to create a collaborative system to connect families with the local resources that focuses on prenatal to age 1. So this has been really a combination of a whole year's work and building those relationships with those partners as well. You can move to the next one. So like Marisa said, it's all about really connecting those resources. So we have a very strategic way of doing our meetings. We meet once a month, and our meetings start with a mindfulness practice. My partner, Jody, so always says, you know, the best way we can provide good services to children is to have a well-regulated adult. And I love that. So we start the meeting with, you know, just focusing on ourselves first, and then leads us to the parent voice. So this is the most important part of our meeting. So we include the people who are closest to the children. It should be informing the system building, our parents. The parent experience, it's very unique to us. We contact families in the community who are engaged, but we also contact parents who feel unheard, and we contact them individually to integrate them into that coalition. We invite them to our meeting, and we allow them to really connect with us. But one of the things that we like to do is we like to continue inviting them to participate in every single meeting after that, so they can understand the process of this structure in this building of the coalition. So that's us, Together for Kids, and we welcome anyone who would like to observe Together for Kids meeting. So feel free to contact us, and we will be happy to invite you. And our work in the early childhood agenda has already created more of a partnership throughout Massachusetts with us, connecting us to those local and statewide resources as we continue to structure our early childhood system that focuses on community partnership.
Thank you all so much. And I can't wait to hear more from you all in a little bit after we hear from Damaris and get to Q&A. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Damaris Alvarado-Rodriguez, the Principal CEO of Children's Playhouse Early Learning Centers, to share what collaborative leadership looks like in Philadelphia. So Damaris, welcome. And folks who are participants with this, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A. So Damaris, I will turn it over to you, and I can share slides for you in just a moment.
Sure, thank you so much, Rhonda. Hello, everyone. I am Damaris Alvarado-Rodriguez, Executive Director and owner of Children's Playhouse in South Philadelphia. So we're going to talk a little bit about my journey, our journey in healing joy and equity in our organization, in our communities, and things that we have done in our communities for the past 20 years. But first, I would like to share a little bit of the history. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in 2003, I opened up the first minority Hispanic owned childcare center and business in South Philadelphia. We were the first Hispanic minority family to move in South Philadelphia, in the area that we moved in. And so we decided to create an environment of childcare for children to go to where they felt safe. In less than 6 weeks, we were full to capacity, and we had to expand. So we decided to expand in 2014, where we created Children's Playhouse, Whitman, and that place, that community, we decided to move into that community because of the high ACE scores, right? There was a lot of trauma in that community. So I went there with intention into really trying to service the community the way they were lacking resources, they were lacking representation. So we wanted to come into that particular community, open up a high quality early child care education facility there, all the way from infants all the way through preschool. And then we started doing school age programming as well. In 2017, we decided to do our second expansion, and that's Children's Playhouse Newbold. They're about a mile away from each other. And the reason we expanded again is because we had a huge wait list of high quality programming, and we partnered with the School District of Philadelphia. We offer Head Start pre-K count slots as well. And in addition to that, we do infant toddler contracted slots, and also PHL pre-K slots. In our organization, we have, between both organizations, we have 200 preschool slots, and 200 preschool slots are free, no matter what income level, no matter what, where they come from, everything is free for all of our families. That was very important for the mission, not only for us to have our core values and mission and the vision of our program to be diversified, to be inclusive, to be equitable, but we also want that to look like in funding. How does that look like with the incomes of the families that are coming in? So we wanted to remove that barrier, apply for as many slots, whoever would accept us, and partner with us at Children's Playhouse and offer that to our families in our communities. In 2020, let me back up a little bit, COVID happened, and the world shut down, including childcare centers. We reopened a few weeks later with a waiver, right, to service our community, because we had a lot of families that were essential workers and they needed to get back out to the world, right, to service the communities. And therefore, so we decided to go ahead and reopen. As I started looking at the community and looking at the gaps that the community had, we service in one of our communities, where is Children's Playhouse Whitman. We had a lot of families that are non-documented families, the immigrant families. So they went into hiding, and I knew that I needed to go into the communities to really support these families and also other community members. So we started bringing in COVID vaccines. We were very successful at being the very first COVID vaccine, hosting the first COVID vaccination clinics in that community, in that neighborhood. We did diaper banks, we did formula, food drives. We actually gave food away every week, and the lines were like 3 blocks long. And that's how I knew that the community really desperately needed those services. So we started digging a little deeper into the community and seeing what else can we offer the community, because the goal of Children's Playhouse is obviously to, provide the high quality programming, to have the children feel safe. But in addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we hit the homes, because if the child is not good at home, or is hungry, or is missing anything, they really can't connect to school. So we wanted to connect from school to home and really engaging and forming those strong family partnerships. I'm a true advocate. I'm advocating everywhere. I sit on many boards. I sit in many advocacy forums. I'm always lifting my voice for injustices, for barriers, to lift barriers. And through COVID, I've realized that I was the only Hispanic person in these large platforms advocating for funding, advocating for supports through COVID, advocating for PPP loans, or, and so on and so forth, with a lot of organizations, they were bringing these resources to me because I went, right? I decided to sit at these tables and go get all the information that I needed to be able to sustain my business. However, there was not a huge representation. So therefore, I decided to create a Latino platform for other Hispanic-owned providers or teachers to come to and meet once a month to really discuss, what's out there. This is what the health department is saying. Let me translate this for you because it's not in your language. So let's work this through together and lift each other up. That was in 2021. We started off with 5 providers. And after the first year anniversary, we decided to create a nonprofit. It's called Latinos Educando Juntos. We are going on our 2nd year anniversary in Latinos Educando Juntos. And that would be in June. And today we have 417 providers across Pennsylvania that has joined our platform. Through that platform, we have provided so many different services, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the other slides. 2023, what is my future look? Because of my spare time, I figured, well, why not expand this and get into more travel, right? Let's really hit more communities. So we decided to expand our Children's Playhouse organization into the North Philadelphia area, where there is a larger population of Latinx Hispanic families in that area. So we're going to bring whatever we're doing or whatever we have done for the past 20 years in the South Philadelphia region of Philadelphia into the North Philadelphia, where there's more Hispanics and more Hispanic families and communities and children. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? Sorry. Community partnerships is really, really strong. So going out into the communities and really partnering. I was pretty lucky because I have a lot of families that are very resourceful because I went out there and asked, right? What can you bring to the plate? I'm trying to build the community up. What can you help with? You can't help with anything when here, serve these foods, So I was pretty much very strategic in making sure that I found a lot of people that can engage and with the mission and really believe in the mission of Children's Playhouse and now Latinos Educando Juntos. So we provide the food banks, COVID-19 resources, health department resources. Again, we are a diaper bank. Immigration services and resources. We've partnered with an immigration lawyer, and that immigration lawyer actually provides trainings or resources or maybe one-on-ones with families when they don't really trust the environment. So I send them there for that. Workforce development and ECE teacher pipeline. So I work through a lot of projects to helping communities and childcare centers keep their doors open because they were losing so many staffing. And therefore, it just dawned on me. I said, I'm working with the community. I'm going to go to the community and I'm going to build my own pipeline. I was very fortunate that I didn't have to close any of my classrooms down this year or the year before that, because I provided the opportunities for families to come into the ECE workforce. Then I took it a little further. I went into the communities and asked, why are you going into, to work in a factory in a van? Is it because you feel like as though you can't come? What can I help you with, right? Or how can I help you so that way you can join our team? And I realized after going into these communities that a lot of the people that I was actually approaching had degrees. They had degrees in their own country. What kept them from coming is because of the language. They had language barriers. They didn't know where to translate, their degrees, for instance, or where to start or to get ESL coursework. So I decided to create a workforce development module to really support them. And today I have graduated about 16 people in that module for the past year. To be able to be in the ECE sector. And they are today actually going into the associate's degree program. So we did that through our CDA Child Development Associates first, We enabled the ESL coursework, and then now we're supporting them with going into associate's degree or bachelor's degree programs, or they have already registered. And they are with me. So we did a lot of coaching with them, a lot of mentorship with them as well. But there are teachers, and they're so devoted to our program. They love the children, they understand high quality, and we provided representation to our children, which are students, which is really, really important in our organization. In addition to that, we created webinars, trainings, especially to the Hispanic childcare provider network. We decided, it's not out there, we can't find it, let's make it. And that's exactly what we did. Funding's not out there for me, that's fine. I'll self-fund it, because my mission is to make sure that I'm reaching families, I'm reaching organizations, small business owners, and really supporting them. And then childcare subsidy application processing as well is something that we do internally. A lot of our families, like I said, they either too shy or they just don't trust going into government buildings. So we support them with the application process and help them through that paperwork, right, to remove some of those barriers. So if they don't have a copy machine, maybe they don't have money, right, to make those copies. So that we just create all the copies. We sit one-on-one with those families or community members, and then we just, do that application processing just to make sure that they're accessing whatever it is. And it's not only in childcare subsidy application processing. We have done housing, we have done WIC, we have done everything. Whatever the family needs is what we're going to do. We're going to try our very best to continue to support them. Next slide, please. So I don't have a lot of slides, but we're going to talk a lot about this component right here, creating impacts and removing barriers. There's a lot of language injustices happening in the childcare and the ECE component. There are a lot of more family childcare providers that do not speak English, and they are regulated in English, right? So how can you regulate someone if it's not in Spanish or in their language so they can understand and become successful? So these are some of the advocacy components that we have adapted through our Latinos Educando Juntos, this language and justice, normalizing mental health. There's a stigma, right? Especially in the Hispanic community when we mention mental health. So we're trying to normalize mental health and providing them with mental health resources. Increasing advocacy, because voices need to be heard. You need to go out there and you need to lift your voice. And we're actually doing caravans. We have done Let's Go Out to Vote. Let's do Day Without Childcare through Change Makers. And there has been an increase in more Latino representation through our platform. So we're really excited about that. In addition to that, one of our stakeholders released grants applications in Spanish because of us, so we were able and provided support in Spanish. So that was really huge for us that we were able to really fight through that and won through that. Access to resources, promoting self-care. How do we do that? ESL coursework, access to grant funding, professional development training, definitely family partnerships, higher educational opportunities, representation, and leadership. One of the leadership, we created a platform, and it's called the Exceptional Bilingual Leadership Fellowship, and it's a fellowship program. It's 18 weeks, and it's in English and Spanish. And we provide those leadership opportunities into really understanding the early child care field with financing, budgeting, curriculum, leading a whole entire team. So we created that through our platform as well. Can't wait to see what 2023 has in store for us. We've done a lot of work. We finalized our board, a very strong, very diverse board full of fierce leaders. And I'm really excited to take this work to the next level. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Damaris. I cannot wait to jump into Q&A. Just want to remind folks, that if you have questions, please add them in the Q&A portion. I will start us off with a few questions, but definitely feel free to add, and we will get to as many as we can in the next 12 minutes. So I just want to invite you to go ahead and add those questions in the chat box. I am going to highlight one question that came up, and I'll invite Yolanda and Marisa back on screen, and we'll spotlight our videos. But just one question that came up, and I think Yolanda may have responded to this, but I just want to share it because not everybody may have seen it. But this question came from George, who said, regarding leading with family voice at meetings, was there any orientation or training that community members needed, that staff had ready, or that you did to make sure power sharing, make sure you all were considering power sharing? Yolanda, I know you wrote a response, but would love to just invite you to share a little bit more in the room with us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So that's a great question. We don't train the parents. We really just have a conversation with them and say, this is what we're going to be talking about. And you have the floor for 5 to 10 minutes. Obviously, there are times where the conversation can take longer, and that's okay. We really structure the meeting with enough time to allow parents to really just talk. We're there to listen, and their insight is so important for us and for our partners, that we value what they have to say and they feel valued. And that's why we've seen the growth in parents' involvement, because we provide them with that platform, and they attend the meetings and they feel heard. They feel that, I enjoy people are listening and people are taking me seriously, and that my child's issues or my family's problems or, whatever I'm going through, I feel like this community can help me and can provide for me. So we've seen a huge success in the model of engaging parents first. We did start with engaging parents who are currently involved in that community, who know other parents or who already have some relationship with some of our partners. We invite them to talk about certain subjects, and then we saw them inviting other parents, and we seen them invite other people from that community who might enjoy the talk. So it seems like that works. And I'm a parent, and I love when people value what I have to say regarding my children, because who knows best, right, mama? So it really seems to be a good model to engage parents.
Lovely. It looks like we have another question in the chat from Kelly. It says, congratulations on your tremendous success. And I'll preface this by saying that I think any of you can respond to this one, or if you have a couple of different ideas, that would be totally fine. But she says, in approaching communities, where were the types of places that you went to listen to community members?
I went to a lot of RCO meetings. So any neighborhood meeting that was happening, whether if it was in the park, I made sure, in the library, I made sure I was there. And I made sure, I'm an introvert, so I didn't like to really before. I didn't like to, be around people. I kind of felt funny doing that. But I was like, no, I need this, so I just decided just to go wherever they were at. I was there. I think I even went to a Mexican fiesta, and it was amazing. I was so excited. I ended up in somebody's house, but that's what the community did. So it was really a great opportunity to not only communicate and really link, but definitely to understand the culture as well once needed. So
I would just add that as an organization that really does have that more sort of statewide perspective, and that doesn't have the direct sort of connection to practitioners who are in the field or to families, our main sort of objective there was to find organizations and individuals like Yolanda and like Damaris, who do have those longstanding relationships in communities, that do have those meeting points already, and to support them in whatever way we can. And so that kind of took a couple of different turns, but one of the really successful things that we saw was developing facilitation guides. So to say, like, these are the questions we have, this is what we're interested in knowing, here's something to kind of help support you so that you don't have to do all this meeting prep beforehand, but that you can use some of these guiding questions, use the Elevating Voices protocol so that we're inviting those who are either parents or who are closest to the work to speak first, and to utilize those resources at their own meetings rather than asking those families to come to our meetings, which we know that there's no one busier than people who are working with kids or that have their own kids.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I can add something to that real quick. So aside from parents, one of the things that we do for community is in community engagement. We have our monthly meeting, but we do attend to all kinds of social events. And I often tell Marisa and the Advocacy Network that I was invited to a business forum once, and I attend now every single business event in that community. Why? Because business should know about early childhood and how important it is for them to invest in it, for our workforce and for them, their return on investments, right? So I do kind of present myself in all these events, even when I'm not invited, for that same reason, because if I'm a parent, but I'm also an advocate for those kids that don't have a voice. So if I'm able to go there and have them attend our monthly meeting, check us out, listen to what parents have to say, listen to what the community members are saying that we need to work on, then I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. Looks like we have another question in from Frederica. She says, in Arkansas, we are still developing a parent leadership platform. What are some ways you've engaged parents in rural communities to keep them engaged or connected?
I can jump in on this one, just because I know Western Massachusetts is a big constituency in the early childhood agenda and part of our 930 call, and that has been very intentional. I think actually pretty similar to Yolanda's points, it kind of all starts with that one person who already has the longstanding relationship, that whether it's a parent or it's an educator or someone else who's working with children and families that is connected, that wants to be an advocate, that has some of these relationships, because then the floodgates sort of open up. So for us, that was 2 or 3 early educators who lived out in that area and that were involved in the 930 call. And now I'd say, and there's a pretty large group that comes to all the 930 calls and that comes to the early childhood agenda now. So operating in a virtual environment, utilizing Zoom, utilizing some of these online tools has been so helpful for us in that way, because we can meaningfully have conversations and engage individuals who live out in rural communities that maybe wouldn't have been able to drive to Boston for a meeting or an advocacy day.
Mm-hmm. Want to leave space in case any of you all want to jump in more. I actually have a question for you all, because I think you both talked about bringing folks together. And Damaris, I think you may have touched on this a bit, but in terms of working in coalitions and collaborative leadership, how are you all making decisions together? And what have you learned about your coalitions and how you all want to essentially drive transformation together?
Well, it started with a lot of listening, active listening first, because I feel as though, it was a lot of months of complaining and anger. And I had to understand that it was because they weren't provided with the platform to ever voice their opinions or what their needs and asks. Now I'm guiding it more to what is the issue and what are your asks, right? We can't just complain, right? We got advocate for these, but you need an ask. So I'm helping them really understand that component, right? And formulating those asks, right? So are there things that are totally impossible? Yes, at this moment, right? So let's park this at the garage. So let's see what we can handle today. And I feel as though for the past 2 years, mostly this year, the community providers that have been getting together are seeing that, they're really understanding that change is happening. And I'm being really strategic in showing them what changes are happening, right? So what, you couldn't get the regulations changed, but you got the newsletters in Spanish. That's never happened, right? So, we try to celebrate that way and celebrate each other. You made a star 3, I'm going to make a big deal out of it because nobody's going to celebrate, I'm going to celebrate, This is the platform for us to lift each other, celebrate each other, support each other, and provide each other the resources that's needed. So that's my approach to it, and it's been pretty much working. But I do a lot of surveys because I don't want to be only my voice, right? So what is it you need? Here goes the survey. Tell me, right? If you don't want to tell me publicly or maybe in this platform, then you can go ahead and email it to me and do that. So those are the tools that I've been using.
Yeah, Marisa or Yolanda, anything?
Yeah, I can jump in, and actually piggybacking off of that, that was a very similar sort of process that we went through, where we started in the fall by identifying all the challenges. We got sort of everything on the table. We knew that having a venue or a platform to kind of express the frustration, and for many people it's decades of frustration, was a really important part of that process. And then we were able to sort of shift the frame and think about solutions towards the second half of that. So very similar experiences there. But I think the other component that we've been really thinking through is, one, like how we set up the structure. So the stewardship group that's going to be the decision-making body for the entire early childhood agenda, making sure that the representation on that group is taking a number of things into account, so that we're thinking about sort of geographic representation in terms of their sort of professional role, where they sit within early childhood, representation in terms of race and ethnicity, in terms of gender, in terms of just a variety of different things. So that is one component, setting aside specific spots on that group that we know are going to be dedicated towards those who identify as sort of the ones or the twos, the people who are closest to the work, and that either have children of their own or are working with children every day. And then honestly, just the openness and transparency, I think, has helped a lot too. That when we sort of got to the final stage of this process and we're getting close to identifying the 10 priorities, it was really clear to everyone how we were sort of making those decisions, because it was a voting process that was online. All the participants could see what numbers were, or sort of what priorities were being voted on and which ones were raising towards the top. It was that was completely transparent. I think that helped to build some goodwill behind it, or build sort of an understanding of how we were making decisions, that it wasn't just our team that was sort of saying these 10 things are what we're going to push forward, that it was driven by the community.
Beautiful. Thank you. Just like that, our time is just about up. But I have one last question, and I think we can get to it if we stick to about 1 to 2 sentences max. But my question is, what are you most proud of in the work that you've done? So Yolanda, I'm going to start with you and then work our way backwards. And then we'll take 1 more minute after that to just share some announcements and updates. So just something that you're really proud of from the work that you've done.
Family engagement. I know that's a challenge for a lot of people, so I'm very proud of that.
Well, Damaris or Marisa? One thing you're proud of.
I want to say family engagement as well, seeing families get together, strong unity.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the same thing, but I think just engagement more broadly, that coming as an early educator into this work in advocacy and policy now, seeing a continued focus on making sure that those who are closest to this have a role at this table.
Beautiful. Well, man, thank you all so much for joining us, for sharing just how you all are reimagining and redefining early care and education for children, families, and providers, and really transforming systems in your region. So it's really shifting the narrative, and we so appreciate the work. And you're just an inspiration for all of us. So I just have a few announcements or a couple things to share. as we wrap up, to our participants, before you hop off today, I just want to invite you to join us on May 11th for the second webinar in this series, where we will focus on community building and advocacy and birth equity. I also want to share that our podcast series, In the Arena with Now, will be returning for season 2 sometime this summer. And so you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. You can go look at it now to check out our first season. Also, we will be holding our 10th annual National Community Leadership Summit this October. This will be a hybrid event with opportunities to engage both in person and virtually. So keep an eye out for that. And then to learn more about our approach to shared governance and collaborative leadership, feel free to visit the Now Innovation Forum. Check out the Now Playbook. It's a how-to guide around transformative community capacity to advance equity. And you can also find a dignity-centered guide to reflecting on cooperative funding structures on the forum. So thank you all for taking your time to join us today. Thank you to Damaris, Marisa, and Yolanda for sharing with us. We look forward to connecting with you all, our participants, on the forum and through social media. And we'll see you all back here in May. Have a wonderful day. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.